Today we're going to make a game with some artificial intelligence to have the enemies actually chase our hero around the screen. We're going to go ahead and use the 8 direction just so that we've got that easy kind of top-down view of the game. And then it's really easy using the Pathfind behavior in order to have the enemies, and we'll have multiple enemies, actually chase and locate where the hero is and then follow them. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to create a blank project, and we're not going to change the window size or the layout size for now. You can make yours bigger or smaller if you'd like, but I'm just going to leave them the same. So let's go ahead and start with a background. We use tile background. I provided just a couple here, so let's just load this one in, and we'll just zoom out and we'll fill up the whole screen here. Now let's go ahead and create our hero. So we're going to use a sprite, and we'll place him right here. Provided a couple of different images. You can use any images that you want. I'm going to use this guy here. He's kind of a little flying guy. And there's some additional animation frames. So let me just load all of those in, 1 through 8. There we go. So you can see his wings kind of flap up and down. Now it's not the perfect character for this game because it's actually not a top-down sprite, but that's fine. You can use a top-down sprite, but I just wanted one that had a little bit of animation, and this was one that I had. So we're going to go ahead and use him. The next thing we'll do is we'll click on the animation, and we'll just loop this so that his wings always are kind of moving even, and we won't do anything with the start and the stop of him. We'll just have it be always flapping even if he's not moving. So now we'll go ahead and add some of the behaviors to our character. Since it's a 8 direction and we've got our window size smaller than our layout, let's go ahead and use the scroll 2 so the camera follows him around. And then we'll also do the wrap, because as we go off the left and the right, we want them to wrap around. And then we'll also add the 8 direction so that we can actually move them around. So this will give all of our behaviors that we need for our main hero. And then let's also rename him Hero. So let's go ahead and create an enemy, and we're just going to put them on the screen here, even though we're going to dynamically create more of them as the game goes on. Now, there's a number of different heroes here. I'm actually going to load in a bunch of them, and their sprites are different, but what we're going to use is we'll use that random to pick a different enemy so that it's not always the same. But for right now, we're just going to load all of them in. We'll go ahead and delete this first frame. So we've got 7 frames here, 0 through 6. And then we also want to make sure that we set this speed to 0 because we don't want those frames to move forward as part of the game. So we'll randomly pick one of those 7 when we spawn the enemy. For now, we're not going to spawn them. We're just going to have one on the screen, and it's going to be this first one, number 0. So we'll close that. Our enemy is a little bit bigger than we want, so let's just go ahead and resize him, and we'll make him just a little bit smaller, about like that. And the other thing we're going to do is we'll rename him Enemy so we can find him later. And then he gets one behavior, and he's going to get this Pathfind behavior, Pathfinding. It's right here. It's got this A with an arrow to the B. Now what Pathfinding does is it allows us to say, I want to find a path on our game from where I'm at to another location, and I do want to avoid obstacles. So for example, if we've got a solid on the screen, we want the enemy in this case to go around that block, that solid, if it's in the way. So it's kind of an interesting way to do it. Now, if you had something like a Pac-Man game with a grid, you could always use those grids as solids, and then he would find a path through. Now, there's actually quite a few different ways to set up this ability for an enemy to follow your hero. This one works really, really well because it goes around those solids. If we're going to do something a lot simpler, we could just simply set a timer and then literally just move the enemy number of pixels one way or the other towards a destination. But this is a really interesting behavior, so we're going to go ahead and use that today. So now we're going to add a couple of events to actually have our enemy chase our hero around. So on the event sheet, the way we're going to do this is we're going to say every second, and we're going to use 1 second. Now, if you use a longer time period, your enemy will actually stop and then move again, because it won't always take that long to get there. So that's another interesting effect, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But for right now, we're just going to use every 1 second. And then for our action, what we're going to do is we're going to say enemy, and we're going to use that pathfind to find a path. And so you're going to find it right here under pathfinding, find a path. So we're going to say find a path to where our hero is. Now remember, our hero is always moving. I mean, he could stop, but I mean, in general, the hero is going to be moving. And so what's going to happen is every second, wherever the hero is at, we're going to tell the enemy to go to that location by creating a path and avoiding obstacles. So it gives a nice way to do that. And the way we're going to set this up is we're going to use the hero's X and Y coordinates. So we're essentially saying every 1 second, we want our enemy to find a path to where our hero is, and that's all it does right now, is just find that path. It doesn't actually traverse the path. We're going to add that in here in just a second. So that's going to be how we find our paths. So now the path is found, what we're going to do is we're going to tell our enemy that we're going to go to that location. So if you scroll down under, we're going to create a new event, and we're going to come down and we're going to say on path found. And what this is going to do is as soon as that path is found, we're going to create some action. And that action is going to be enemy, and we're going to tell it to follow that path. So we're going to come down here and we're going to say move along path. So this is now going to say, and this is just going to, because it's an event, this is going to run constantly. As long as there is a path, we're going to have the enemy follow that path. Now there are scenarios where that path may fail. For example, our enemy may not be on the screen at all. Maybe he died and hasn't been respawned yet. So in that scenario where this find path is going to fail and there won't be a path, and therefore our enemy won't follow the path. So with these two events, we can now have our hero move around the screen and the enemy essentially chase him. Let's go ahead and test this real quick and see how it works. All right. Okay, so you see our enemy rotated because our hero was to the left of him. So now as I move this, you'll see our enemy is following us. And you'll see it's following us and it's turning and rotating as well, just because it's following it based on the turns. Now we're going to disable that real quick just so that he doesn't rotate, so our enemy is always right side up. Again, these aren't really the perfect top-down images because they're more kind of side view, but they'll work fine once we set that angle so that he can't move, he can't turn. So to set that angle for our enemy, let's just go ahead and select our enemy, and you'll see right here there's a property that says rotate object. We're going to set that to no, and now let's go ahead and run that again, and you'll see the enemy doesn't turn anymore. He's always that same right side up. So there you have it. So now he's just going to follow our hero around, and the way this ends up working is if our hero leaves the screen, the enemy will still create a path, but it's not going to wrap around. It's going to find a path to where he's now on the screen. So you saw he just came up from the bottom. So that's going to give us a nice little effect so we can outrun our enemy by leaving the screen and then coming back on the other side. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some obstacles. We want to have some things that are in our ways, and they'll be solid so that our pathfind goes around them. So we'll go ahead and create a couple of different sprites. So the first one we're going to do is just going to be this cactus. So we'll use this cactus right here. And I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller. There we are. And then I need to add the solid behavior to this so that the pathfind will go around it. Now I'm going to just copy a few of these and I'm going to place them around the layout. Then I'm going to add another sprite, and this time I'm going to use this palm tree. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to resize this a little bit. It's just too big. And then I'm going to add the solid behavior. And then I'm going to make a few copies of these throughout the screen. And so now the Pathfind is going to avoid those. So we'll go ahead and run this here in just a second, and you can see that. But before we do that, let's go ahead and rename these. So let's call this cactus, and let's call this tree. Okay, so let's run this. And so now you'll see the paths actually get created around the trees. So you see he won't go through the tree to get to us. The collision points are a little bit off on those trees, but we can tweak that if necessary. And you can see our hero kind of keeps up with us. We can adjust that speed a little bit as well, just so that he can actually either catch us or not catch us, depending on how we want the game to work. All right, so now let's go ahead and add some coins to this layout so that we have something to collect. So we'll go ahead and create a new sprite, and we'll place it off the screen here. And there's a couple of sprites for this, so let's just go ahead and load all of those in. We'll delete the first one. And then let's click here, and then we'll go ahead and just loop this so that they are always running through the animation. And then we'll go ahead and rename this to coin. Now let's go ahead and create a particles so when we catch the coins, they'll actually explode. So we'll go ahead and use just this main frame for our coin. And then we'll go ahead and set the continuous spray to 1 shot. And we'll have the coins full 360. So let's go ahead and set that to 360 as well. And now let's set it up so that every 2 seconds a coin will just randomly get created on the screen. So on our event sheet, we'll go ahead and say system every X seconds, and we're going to use 2. And then our action, what we'll do is we'll say system create an object. It'll be that coin. And then we're going to use random because we want it to just randomly appear. And we'll use 0 and 1700. Our screen is about 1700 wide. And then we'll say random 0 900. And our screen is it's a little over 900. It's about, I think it's 980 or 970. But this will at least create them within that main body. And then we'll go ahead and click done. All right, so before we run this, let's go ahead and allow our hero to actually collect those coins. So we'll add another event and we'll say hero on collision with, and we'll go ahead and pick that coin. And then what we'll do is we'll have the coin spawn another object. That object will be the particles. And we'll go ahead and just leave it as image point 1. And then we'll destroy the coin. All right, so now let's go ahead and run that and see if our coins get spawned. All right, so since they'll randomly appear anywhere on the screen, we may not see them. Oh, one just spawned underneath us. So there's one. So now we can go grab the coin. And you can see the particles has them spawn. And because of the way our screen is laid out, we may actually get one that gets spawned on top of a plant or a tree, in which case we may not actually be able to collect it, but that's okay. So you can see how our hero navigated around those trees when I left the screen and popped up on the other side. Now also keep in mind, I just have it every 2 seconds those get spawned. So if you leave this run, eventually the whole screen is going to be filled with coins, just because there's no condition where they're not going to spawn them. They're always going to spawn them. Okay, so let's go ahead and set it up so that we auto spawn more enemies just dynamically throughout the game. We don't want to have just one because we're going to set it up so that we can shoot those enemies. So what we'll do is we'll do just like we did with the coins. We're going to say system every, and I'm going to say every 10 seconds we'll spawn a new enemy. So the action for that's going to be the same as our coin. We're going to say system create object. We're going to use the enemy. And then for the XY, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say random 0 1700 for the X and random 0 900 for the Y. So that'll be anywhere on the screen. Now these may also get spawned on top of a cactus or a tree, but that's fine. The way Construct 2 will handle that is it'll just jerk it over to the left or the right or the top or the bottom of the tree, and it'll all work just fine. So we don't have to worry about spawning them on top of those other solid objects. And then the second thing that we want to add is we want to have different enemies each time. We don't want to spawn the same enemy. So let's go ahead and set the animation frame to be a different one every time. So we'll add another action and we'll say set frame. And remember we have 7 of them, so we're going to say random 0, 7. And that'll actually create a number 0 through, actually create a number 0 through 6. If we want the last one, we'll have to use 0 through 8, and then that'll allow us to get a 7 value because it won't actually pick that last number. So we'll go ahead and save this, and then we'll run this, and we'll actually see if we spawn multiple enemies. Now we didn't put any conditions in to not spawn an infinite amount. So this is actually going to spawn a lot of enemies, and they're just going to continue to spawn over and over again. So the first one was obviously there. Now we should see the other ones start to find a path to us as they're being spawned. Keep in mind they're only being spawned every 10 seconds, so we don't have a lot of them. Okay, so there you saw another enemy come in and get spawned. Since we've got the duration kind of a long period of time, takes a little while for them to show up. So now we've got 3 that have been spawned. So now we don't want to create an infinite number of enemies. So let's add another condition to this and say we're going to limit that. So we're going to say add another condition, and we're going to say system compare 2 values, and we're going to say enemy, and then we're going to see how many are on the screen dot count. So this will count up how many are actually on the screen, and we're only going to do this if it's less than or equal to 5. So if there's less than or equal to 5 enemies, then we'll spawn a new one. If there's more than 5, then this won't get called and we won't spawn them. So that'll create the ability for us to have up to 5 enemies on the screen at a time. And then if we kill one, another one will allow to be created when that 10 seconds occurs. All right, so now let's create the ability to shoot our enemies. So we're going to have it set up so that if you press the space bar, you'll be able to shoot. So let's go back to our layout. Let's add the keyboard so that we can use the keyboard. Now let's go ahead and create a new sprite, and this time we're going to do just this little bullet so that we can have something to shoot. So we'll just load in the bullet image. Now our bullet image is going to get one behavior, and it's going to be the bullet behavior. So let's add that. And we don't need to change any of these properties, but if you wanted to, you can. For example, if you didn't want it to shoot and go through our plants, you could set this from no to yes, in which case it'll actually bounce off of the plants, and which might be what you want, but you can change that property if you'd like. All right, so now that we've got the keyboard, let's go ahead and go to the event sheet, and let's create an event for keyboard on key pressed, and we're going to use the space bar. And then what we're going to have happen is we're going to actually fire. So we'll go ahead and say hero, spawn another object, and then we're going to use that bullet. And right now we only have one image point, 0, which is the middle. So we'll change that here in a minute, but for right now we'll leave that as 0. And then the second action that we need to do is this will always go at an angle of 0. But we need it to go whichever direction our hero is pointing. So we'll go ahead and say bullet, and then we're going to say set angle of motion. And that angle is going to be our hero.8direction.moving angle. So that's the direction in which our player is moving, our hero is moving. So wherever that direction is, we want the bullet to go towards. So that's what we use, hero.8direction.moving angle. And then I forgot to rename my bullet, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. So we'll call this bullet. All right, so now we can run this, and our hero should be able to shoot bullets, although we haven't created any collisions on those bullets yet. So let's give this a try. There we go. So you can see when I press the space bar, he'll shoot a bullet right out of the center of him. But like I said, we don't have any collisions on that. All right, let's allow the player to shoot our enemies now. So we're going to do two things. We're going to create particles to have our enemies explode. So let's create another particle, and we'll place it off the screen. And we're going to use this cloud explosion icon. And let's go ahead and set the continuous spray to 1 shot, and let's set this to 180, so it's just half of it, and then let's rotate it 270 so that all the explosions go up instead of all the way around. So they'll just essentially go up out of our enemy for that. All right, now on the event sheet, let's have the collisions occur. So we're going to say new event, bullet, on collides with another object, and this will be our enemy. And for the enemy, for the action, we're going to say enemy, spawn another object, and then we're going to use that particles that we just created, and we'll leave it as image point 0. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to destroy our enemy. So now we'll unbullet, uncollision with enemy, we'll spawn the particles, and then we'll destroy our enemy. So let's run that and test it. All right, so I'm going to shoot our enemy, and there you see it blows up. There's another one. Now I noticed that even though I set that angle, it's still going just to the right. I forgot we need to actually set that angle in the event itself so that it actually goes the right direction. So we'll fix that now. So we're going to add one more action here, which is going to be particles set angle, and we're going to set that to 270, which is going to be straight up, just so that our particles go up, and that'll fix that. All right, so the last thing that we're going to do, if you remember, our enemy is actually shooting from image point 0, so from the middle of his body. So let's go ahead and change that by adding another image point. So we'll go to our hero, and we'll pick image point, and we'll create another one, and we're going to set it out kind of at the front of him here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if we set this for the 1, what will happen is none of the other animation frames have it. They all still just have 0. So what will end up happening is if this is the frame 0 that he's on, when you fire, it'll fire correctly. Otherwise, it'll fire from image point 0 again. But there's an easy way to fix that. If we right-click on our image point 1 that we just created, and we say apply to it doesn't matter, whole animations or all animations, since we only have one animations, that will actually apply that same image point to all of them. So now you'll see they all have an image point 1. So we'll need to do that to make sure that no matter which frame he's on, it fires from the front of him. And then the last thing that we'll do is right here where we have the space bar, we'll go ahead and change this to image point 1. So now he'll shoot from the front of him. So let's go ahead and run that and test those last few things. All right, so we'll see. So now he's shooting from the front, which is what we want. And let's see if our enemies explode up through the top like they're supposed to. Perfect. And as you can see, I don't have those collision points exactly perfect, but if you want to tweak those, you can tweak them just so that your hero can more easily bump into things or not bump into them, depending on how you want that to work on your game. All right, so the last thing to do is to actually have our, if we want our enemies to destroy our player, you can add that in so that on collision with our hero and enemy, we destroy our hero and then restart him or something like that. The other thing that you could add is a second layer in order to put a heads-up display on to keep track of the coins. But we've covered those on a lot of the other videos, so I'll go ahead and leave that to you to add. And then also, we can set up a door that maybe appears after 20 seconds that allows the player to go from level 1 to level 2, and then you can create multiple levels. Again, we've covered that quite a few times on other videos, so I'm not going to bother covering it today. So good luck. Hope you enjoy. Thanks.